This passage is adapted from Ruth Ozeki, A Tale for the Time Being. Ruth, an American novelist, lives on a remote Canadian island with her artist husband Oliver. The home they bought in Valetown was built in a meadow-like clearing that had been hacked from the middle of the dense, temperate rainforest. A smaller cottage stood at the foot of the drive where her mother would live on all sides. Massive Douglas firs, red cedars, and big leaf maples surrounded them, dwarfing everything human. When Ruth first saw these giant trees, she wept. They rose up around her, ancient time beings, towering 100 or 200 feet overhead. At 5 feet 5 inches, she had never felt so puny in all her life. We are nothing, she said, wiping her eyes. We are barely here at all. Yes, Oliver said, isn't that great? And they can live to be 1,000 years old. She leaned against him, tilting her head all the way back so she could see the treetops, piercing the sky. They are impossibly tall, she said. Not impossibly, Oliver said, holding her so she wouldn't fall. Just a matter of perspective. If you were that tree, I wouldn't even reach the bottom of your ankle bone. Oliver was overjoyed. He was a tree guy and had no use for tidy vegetable gardens or shallow rooted annuals like lettuce. When they first moved in, he was still quite ill, prone to disease spells, and easily tired. But he started a daily regimen of walking, and soon he was running the trails. And it seemed to Ruth as if the forest were healing him, as if he were absorbing its inexorable life force. As he ran through the dense understory, he could read the signs of arboreal intrigue, the drama in power struggles as species vied for control over a patch of sunlight, or giant firs and fungal spores opted to work together for their mutual benefit. He could see time unfolding here and history embedded in the whorls and fractal forms of nature, and he would come home sweating and breathless and tell her what he had seen. Their house was made of cedar from the forest. It was a whimsical two-story structure built by hippies in the 1970s, with a shake roof, deep eaves, and a sprawling front porch overlooking the small meadow and encircled by the tall trees. The real estate agent had listed the house as having an ocean view, but the only glimpse of water it afforded was from a single window in Ruth's office, where she could see a tiny patch of sea and sky through a U-shaped notch in the treetops, which looked like an inverted tunnel. The real estate agent pointed out that they could cut down the trees that were blocking their view, but they never did. Instead, they planted more. In a futile attempt to domesticate the landscape, Ruth planted European climbing roses around the house. Oliver planted bamboo. The two species quickly grew up into a densely tangled thicket, so that soon it was almost impossible to find the entrance to the house if you didn't already know where it was. The house seemed in danger of disappearing, and by then the meadow was beginning to shrink too, as the forest encroached like a slow-moving coniferous wave threatening to swallow them completely. Oliver wasn't worried. He took the long view. Anticipating the effects of global warming on the native trees, he was working to create a climate change forest on 100 acres of clear cut owned by a botanist friend. He planted groves of ancient natives, Meta sequoia, giant sequoia, coast redwoods, juglans, ulmus, and ginkgo species that had been indigenous to the area during the Eocene thermal maximum some 55 million years ago. Imagine, he said, palms and alligators flourishing once again as far north as Alaska. This was his latest artwork, a botanical intervention he called the Neocene. He described it as a collaboration with time and place, whose outcome neither he nor any of his contemporaries would ever live to witness, but he was okay with not knowing. Patience was part of his nature, and he accepted his lot as a short-lived mammal, scurrying in and out amid the roots of the giants. But Ruth was neither patient nor accepting, and she really liked to know. After a few short years, 15 to be exact, brief by his count, interminable by hers, surrounded by all this vegetative rampancy, she was feeling increasingly unsure of herself. She missed the built environment of New York City. It was only in an urban landscape amid straight lines and architecture that she could situate herself in human time and history. As a novelist, she needed this. She missed people. She missed human intrigue, drama, and power struggles. She needed her own species. According to the passage, what is Ruth's initial reaction to encountering the forest of Whaletown? She is overwhelmed by its immensity. She's surprised by the diversity of species. She feels a sense of kinship. She wishes to return to the city. So this is A, because it comes here when she saw the giant trees, she wept. They rose up around her, ancient time beings towering 100 or 200 feet overhead. She felt puny. So she was overwhelmed by how immense they were. In the context of the passage, Oliver's replies in lines 14 to 15 and 20 to 23 can best be understood as 14 to 15. Yes, isn't that great? And they can live to be 1,000 years old. Not impossibly. Holding her so she wouldn't fall is just a matter of perspective. Right. So this is kind of his reaction to, how Ruth reacted. Understood as rehearsed attempts to help Ruth take a more positive view of the situation. Neutral, factual statements intended to teach Ruth more about their new surroundings. Casual observations inadequate to addressing Ruth's level of concern. Deliberate efforts to dismiss Ruth's feelings. So I don't like D, it's extreme. We are nothing, we are barely here at all. And then he says, isn't that great? And they can live to be 1,000 years old. And they're impossibly tall, not impossibly, it's just a matter of perspective. So I think A may probably make sense, but I don't know if it was rehearsed. Neutral, factual statements intended to teach Ruth more about their new surroundings. So see, the thing is that Oliver obviously loved the fact that he was in this surrounding, while Ruth was a little circumspect. So, and then, he's trying to kind of get her to understand it better, right? So I think I'll go with B, because he was probably trying to get her to understand the place better. I don't think he was trying to dismiss her feelings or that these were rehearsed attempts. And I don't know if they were inadequate to addressing her level of concern, because she did come to like the place. According to the passage, what was one initial assumption Ruth and Oliver had about their new house? It would have a better view of the ocean. It would be less isolated. It would not be surrounded by trees. It would need major repairs. So I think it would be A, because the estate agent had listed the house as having an ocean view, but there was only a glimpse of water, right? So they expected to have a better view of the ocean. The description in the 9th paragraph mainly serves to 55 to 65. In a futile attempt to domesticate the landscape, Ruth planted European climbing roses around the house and Oliver planted bamboo. The house seemed in danger of disappearing. Yeah, so they try to domesticate it, but the forest won't allow it. Provide context for a discussion of the novel Ruth is writing, suggests that Ruth and Oliver are naive in their assumptions about nature. Communicate the increasing intensity of nature's presence in Ruth and Oliver's life. Explain the reasoning behind Oliver's plan to create his own forest. So this is C, right? The author is trying to suggest that even though they were trying to domesticate the place and they were trying to, plant roses and bamboo, ultimately the immensity of the forest came upon them, and it was that even these two domestic species, they grew into a thicket, and the house seemed in danger of disappearing. So that captures the intensity of the nature around them. Based on the passage, Oliver would most likely agree with which statement about works of art? Okay, let's mark the line numbers 42, 45, 70, 74. 42 to 45. 70 to 74, 78, 82, 82, 84. 78 to 82 and 82 to 84. Okay, so we are looking at Oliver's impressions or Oliver's statement about works of art. It was a whimsical two-story structure built by hippies and overlooking the small. So this doesn't really indicate anything about Oliver's viewpoint. He planted groves of ancient natives. This was when he thought he was trying to look upon this, this climate change forest on a 100-acre. That is what he was doing. This was his latest artwork. He described it as a collaboration with time and place, whose outcome neither he nor any of his contemporaries would ever live to witness, but who he was okay with not knowing. Patience was part of his nature. Okay, so let's look at the options now. They tend to be most original when they involve collaboration among multiple artists. They do not necessarily have to be confined to a formal setting. They are likely to appeal to a wide audience when they depict images from nature. They are often the creation of people who do not consider themselves artists. Okay, so let's just, I think it would have to be C or D. This was his latest artwork. He described it as a collaboration with time and place, whose outcome neither he nor his contemporaries would live to witness. Patience was part of his nature, and he accepted his lot. He was okay with not knowing, right? He was okay with not knowing. Yeah, so I'm going with C for this, and I'm going with B for this because this was a collaboration in nature. This was something, this was something that he was doing. He looked upon it as a work of art, even though this was something that was done on open ground and it was essentially a forest. It wasn't really art as we understand it, right? So, according to the passage, Ruth attempts to make her home environment more tolerable by introducing a certain species of plant, altering certain features of the house, encouraging people to visit her, obtaining a clearer view of the ocean. So it's not C and D. We know that I think we'll just, we have to go back because she planted European climbing roses around the house. So that was her attempt to domesticate, even though it was futile, right? So A, as used in line 83, lot most nearly means, and he accepted his lot as a short-lived human. So he accepted his fate, his destiny, his fate, right? That was his fate as a short-lived human. Based on the passage, which choice most accurately characterizes Oliver and Ruth's relationship? It is based mainly on a shared appreciation of nature. It is plagued by quarrels about their respective art projects. It has grown stronger since Ruth started helping Oliver deal with his illness. It has become more challenging because Oliver and Ruth are opposites in certain respects. So I think it's D. I'll probably go with D because towards the end, we know that, that even though Oliver was patient and he could wait for this project to take off and not go anywhere else, Ruth was not like that, right? She missed New York City. She missed the urban landscape there, right? So there was a bit of a challenge in their relationship because they were opposites in certain respects. I don't think they have a shared appreciation of nature. I think Oliver appreciates it more than Ruth does. I don't think they quarrel about their art projects, or I don't think there's a lot of mention of how their relationship grew stronger. So D. It can most reasonably be inferred from the passage that Ruth might become more content with her life in Whaletown if she were able to cultivate the type of plants that are more commonly found in cities, persuade Oliver to spend more time with her, have more free time to work on her writing, socialize with various groups of people. So it's D, right? It's very clearly given here that she missed people, she missed human intrigue, she needed her own species. So if she was able to socialize more, she would be happier.